We're going to be going over all the many myths that sort of make their way into transfer admissions. You are joined by the Transfer Center at SRJC, and we are going to demystify the transfer admission process. You've likely heard some sort of what seemed to be a fact about transfer admissions. Maybe you questioned it, maybe it seemed convincing enough, heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend kind of thing, only to find out that that wasn't accurate at all. And who knows where it came from, but it was enough to scare you and maybe even change some of your plan. We're going to break all of those down today. So a lot of times students feel like they have to have, high grades within all of their classes to get a fair look in the admission process. And that's not always the case. It's not always just about classes and grades. I will say that I'm going to make some generalizations today about admissions, and it does depend on your major, and it does depend on your college list, meaning where you're applying. Major prep, however, across the board for transfer is usually very important. In some cases, it's absolutely required to have certain classes completed in the major at a certain GPA. But for many schools, you might not have to have major prep completed, and you might not have to have a certain GPA in that major prep work. So it does depend on the college list. But what I want to focus on for a minute is holistic review. So in some of the UCs, admission processes, holistic review is used. Private schools a lot of times will use holistic review. Holistic means whole. They're looking at you as an entire person. So it's not just classes and grades they're looking at. They're looking at your activities. They're looking at your background, some of the barriers you've overcome. They're just looking at your life. So that includes classes and grades, but oh so much more. And when schools use holistic review, like UC Berkeley, sometimes one myth is, these applications aren't even looked at, right? But for the holistic reviewers, they read every single word. So when you are putting in all that work to write your personal insight questions and your activities, it will all be read and it will be included to give an idea of who you are again as that whole person. When we talk about this word context, this is really important for schools that use holistic review. Which are several of the UCs, private schools. Context is sort of where you grew up, right? And then not even grew up so much in the sense of we use it, but like academically, where were you? It can be your environment, your community, even your family, your culture, your school. And they look at that as a way to make some evaluation about your academic record. So an example would be if you have a pretty significant learning challenge and you have straight A's, they're going to look at that amazing record as being even more amazing because perhaps it's been challenging and yet you've done quite well. And then at the exact same time, you can use it to say, I have this big learning challenge and actually I don't have straight A's. My grades might be a little shaky in my opinion. But now I kind of understand that, given the context of this learning challenge. So it kind of explains everything. It gives a lot of background information. The pool refers to just the admission pool. You never really know who you are, quote, competing with, right? So it's hard to always predict how admissions are going to look every year because we don't know who is applying. But that gives context too. How are you sort of stacking up next to your peers who are applying? But there are so many things that go into assessing that for those who do holistic review, like the things I've mentioned. One other myth that comes up a lot for transfer admission is students can sometimes self-select out of applying to a UC. Maybe they love that UC, they have the major you want, but you've deemed yourself, quote, not smart enough to get in. You really want to be careful of that language going through your head. First of all, we know there's no such thing as smart and not smart, right? Intelligence is not fixed like that. There are many forms of intelligence. So if you feel like I want to go to this school, it would be a good fit, but I'm not smart enough, this is where you want to talk it out with someone, talk with a counselor to see that you might actually be a great candidate, and that it's really not always that simple of a assessment tool to say I'm smart or not smart in terms of whether or not you're going to apply to a UC. And then keep in mind, you might think that because the admission rate for some majors at in some UCs is really high, but other schools within the UC system have a much more open admission process. So they are admitting more students. Their admission rates allow for more students to get in, like Merced or Riverside, depending on your major. So don't always just self-select out of a school because you've come up with this notion. It is a myth, and it's a lot of times because of holistic review. It doesn't always come down to classes and grades. Sometimes major matters, and I'm going to give you an example of UCLA. They put out this graph from 2018 that shows the highly selective majors. And UCLA has said, we keep getting students applying to the same majors over and over and over. And then the pool of applicants is driven up, so they have to accept less. So for example, a student who's applying as a business economics major is competing with this many students. So it was over 2,000. Whereas applied math, which is a very much related major that can set you up for business, many times you don't need a very specific major to get into a career path. Sometimes you do, like nursing. But for many other fields, it can be a related major. And look at how your admission odds, your odds of getting in increase by picking a different major that is related. So it was 10% chance of getting into business econ in 2018. But if you had picked applied math or even Asian studies, and this is because, we have a global economy and business is done, outside of the United States. So Asian studies is popular. Look at your admission odds now, 39%, 31% as compared to that 10. And you can see this across the board with many different majors. If this isn't readily available information, you can contact the campus, talk to a campus rep and say, I'm interested in biology, but are there other majors that might give me a better chance of getting in, that are related, that can, feed into the career path I have planned for myself? So once we get into, actually planning the application itself, we're moving away from just the general admission process and what goes into the application. So you're like filling it out at this point. It's really important that you speak from the heart and show genuineness. Here's another myth that relates back to one we already talked about. Colleges are not always choosing the students with the highest GPA. Sometimes, especially the holistic reviewers, they might choose a student whose GPA is not as high, but all of the context, the life story that you provide as a potential student is really appealing to them because you're part of a bigger campus community. You don't usually just sit in class, study, and go home. You're interacting with others, you're joining clubs, you're getting internships. And this is where aptitude plus attitude is important. Aptitude implies, maybe the classes and grades you're choosing and doing well. How are you going to do in your coursework? But the attitude's really important. And sometimes the student with grades are a little bit under another applicant has the experience and the attitude to really shine on campus. So it's coming back to that first notion of it's just about classes and grades. I like this quote. This comes from Fred Bruno. He's a Stanford alum and a recruiter. And he says, when I meet with an applicant, I look for interaction, for presence. We assume they have huge credentials. I don't even ask them about grades. We're looking at the human side. I think when you go to fill out your application, especially for the UCs in private school that asks for more than classes and grades, it feels a little bit more like an interview process where they get to know you, and your classes and grades alone are not representative of you, right? There's more a lot of times. Here are a couple videos to just kind of help push the point forward of finding college fit. So you're developing your college list. What are you selecting? It goes beyond some of the things you might think of.
Everybody has what I call priorities to their college search, and they're all different, but they are the non-negotiable driving criteria. And for some people, it's location. It may be distance from home. It certainly is going to be, if you do have a focused academic interest, does a college have it? No point in going there if they don't. It may be access to being able to work while you're going to college, because you may be paying part of the way. And affordability may very much be at the top of your list. You're not going to be able to go to a college that you and your family can't afford. Then after you've identified those kind of non-negotiable must-have, then they're the next level, which we call preferences, but they're negotiable. So it's a good idea in your notebook, your college counseling notebook or whatever you call it, to have a page with 2 columns and start making a record of the things that are not negotiable and then the things that are preferences, but you might flex on them if you get everything else that you want. Maybe your parents will let you go more than a day's drive if it's a school where you get all these other things that you want, plus it's affordable.
So a little bit more about College Fit comes to us from Lloyd Thacker, who's the executive director of a group called the Education Conservancy. And the point that both these people are making is that we need to find really what will fulfill us at the campus. We know that major obviously is really important, but there is so much more. And students sometimes get a little stuck on something called big name, right? The school that everybody kind of oohs and ahs over. And that school probably has amazing credentials and it's popular for a reason, but it's not everybody's, like they say, cup of tea, right? It's not going to maybe be your vibe or your energy, and that is important to consider.
College is about growing, learning, and changing, and discovering things about yourself and about the college, so that there are things that you can't know right now about yourself and about the college, and yet you're trying to make matches with respect to that. So the best that you're doing is precision guesswork. Be confident with that, be imaginative, and know that you can do it.
So what he means by precision guesswork is that you are doing the most research you can, but at the end of the day, you might not get it totally right, but you want to get as close as possible based on good, solid research. So when we're talking about College Fit, I always recommend that students dig into a college's website or try to find videos through like their outreach services or something that offer campus tours, and also go into the webpage for their major. And what you can, glean from that is, what is the coursework? Is there a certain focus within the coursework? Where are people getting internships? Where have people gotten positions once they have finished at that school? And you can also get an idea of the clubs on campus. And campuses will have a particular culture on them. And in each major, the major has a certain flavor. So an example is psychology. Psychology at some schools is really focused on psychological theory and models of counseling and collaboration, and it's the real human side as people are interacting. And then on other schools, it's brain science and studying neural pathways, how the brain is functioning. It's more hard science. You're going to want to know which one before you go preparing for it, because those are very different. That's a very different focus between campuses. And that's where you can get the information through a web page. And so you want to make sure that you are mindful of the campus culture. Sometimes schools with big names might not be the fit for you. So an example is I had a student who really wanted that big name school. They got there only to find out it was really, really academically competitive, which some people would thrive in, but she did not like that. She wanted a much more down-to-earth campus. And so that big name that people oohed and awed about really wasn't fitting the criteria she was looking for, but she kind of couldn't get past the big name. So that's where the 2 videos I just showed you give you some ideas of how you're going to do that research. Campuses do provide tours, even virtually, and that's a great way to learn more about the school. Now, looking at the different school systems, sometimes, coming up to another myth, students deem UCs as better than CSUs, and that's just simply not the case. Yes, it's true that some UCs have really high competitive, admission rates. Berkeley's tough to get into, UCLA's tough to get into, but Cal Poly's tough to get into, and that's a CSU. So is Fullerton and San Diego State. So when you're looking at just tough to get into, that might not feed into this idea of what's the best college fit for you. Just because it's tough to get into doesn't necessarily even mean it's going to land you a better job. It depends on the field as to how they view a degree from a school that has a high admission rate. You might find that at a school that's, let's just say, not that hard to get into, they have an amazing internship program. You get experiences within your field that you wouldn't have gotten at the other school, and your resume is so much stronger. That might get you the job rather than touting the big name school. So, and not to mention the energy and the vibe of the campus might fit better for you too. So keep that in mind. I have seen students track toward a CSU and then randomly want to throw in a big name UC because they feel like they're just not a good applicant and transfer student if they aren't putting in a really tough to get into school. And you really want to be careful of that because it might just not be the best option for you. And that requires research. The other thing to consider is that some majors are just not available or as available at the UC. So sometimes students are like, nursing is it, that's it for me. But most of the UCs don't have a nursing program. So students kind of get stuck on schools, but not always for the absolute best reasons. So do your research, and then, like our first video speaker said, really kind of journal out what is important to you in a school. Now, when I talk about tour campuses, you can just Google search, UC Merced campus tours and get an idea of what that school looks like. But to give you an idea of just overview of school systems, we have the CSU system, 23 campuses across California. And the application process is really straightforward. You're listing your coursework and your grades, and you're not really providing much else, aside from some personal information, some financial information. No essay, no letters of rec. The UC system does ask you to put coursework in, of course, with grades, but they also want to know more about extracurricular activities. And this does not have to be like captain of the volleyball team. This can be caretaking somebody or being a parent even, or your work experience. And there are 9 undergrad campuses. UC San Francisco is a grad school focused more on medical, so it's really the remaining schools you see here. No letters of rec required, and you send a transcript when it's requested. And then I just want to do a quick shout out for the TAG program, Transfer Admission Guarantee. So when we talk about some schools are so hard to get into, how will I ever get into Santa Barbara? If you meet certain criteria, you're going to get in through the TAG program if it's offered in your major. And you would find that out by going to transfer.santarosa.edu, and on one of our tabs under resources, you learn a lot more about the TAG program. It's Transfer Admission Guarantee. Then we have our private schools and out-of-state schools, and they just vary across every campus. So some have, they usually all have different admission dates and different criteria, but most run on the Comment app, and you are writing essays. They are likely doing holistic review, and you're talking about activities. I'm going to leave it at that and just say, again, visit transfer.santarosa.edu. I have an entire workshop on the Comment application. Okay, another myth that comes up for students is, I just can't afford private schools. Private schools really offer something different a lot of the time. They might have a smaller campus or a very particular way of delivering their academics. Certain schools don't give grades out unless you must have them for med school or something. They give you pages of notes, and that's your quote grade. They have a certain focus on environmentalism or social justice, or it's a school just for women, or with a particular religion that would really work well for you. And so there might be a good reason why private school is the best fit for you. And I would say don't self-select out again based on money. And the reason is because a lot of these schools will have institutional aid. My alma mater, where I graduated from, is always hitting me up for donations, right? So they have pools of money from alum and other sources where they can give that to students. And so when you are making a budget for college, I'd make a budget for applying and not necessarily going. Well, you want to do that too, but for this first part, I'd make that application budget, because a school that has a hefty price tag, this is like a sticker price. When you go to to go buy a car, usually you have the cost of the car written on there, but a lot of times you get it for less. That's sort of how admissions works for private schools. We have something called the cost of attendance. That's the sticker price. And then schools calculate your expected family contribution. Based on your financial information, they'll come up with a number, of, okay, this is the amount that this student can likely pay for school. And then they deduct it from the cost of attendance to give you your need. Well, this is the amount that they think that needs to get covered. And then they might start looking at ways to cover it. Institutional aid might be offered to you. You might qualify for the Pell Grant or the Cal Grant. And this is free money through the state, depending on your financial information. you're going to be looking at scholarships, of course, and then there are loans. If you're going into teaching, there might be a teaching grant. There might be work study available to you. So this is where you want to do a bit more research and make sure that you're not just self-selecting out because it looks really expensive, because it might not be. And we have a workshop on this under transfer.santarosa.edu, and it's labeled Financing Your Bachelor's Degree, and that will give you more information on this topic. Let's just end things with the last myth. There's some secret strategy that can get me admitted to college, right? No, there's not usually. I mean, there are programs like the Transfer Admission Guarantee where it exists, and if you meet this certain criteria, you know you're in. But what this gets at is like, okay, if I just talk all about this one thing, Berkeley loves that, right? Like I'm good to go, and that's not usually how it works. You want to speak from the heart, be genuine in your application, put all the information out there, including barriers if you're comfortable with that, really show how you have learned and grown. And that is going to speak to the admission panel so they can get to know you and make a really fair assessment of your record and who you are, and hopefully welcome you to campus. If you need any more information from here, Transfer Center is more than happy to help you. We run all sorts of workshops and appointments, and you can visit us at transfer.santarosa.edu for some more resources that are printed.